Hi. Yeah. So hello everyone and welcome. Please feel free to perguntar coisas em espanhol. Vocês podem fazer perguntas também em português. Thank you, Giovanna. And yeah, we're going to start this conversation that was originated by what the community was already talking about in many of the previous GLAM Wiki conversations. So we distilled those questions all the community was doing, and we have like 4 main subjects. And I'll let the panel present themselves really quickly because we have a lot of questions and we also want to open it up. So, yes.
Thank you, Sylvia. Hi, I am Selena Deckelman. I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer at the Wikimedia Foundation. I've been working in like open communities for the last over 20 years, and I was most recently working on Firefox as a VP of Product and Engineering there.
Hi, I'm Mike Peel. I'm on the Foundation Board of Trustees. I'm a long-term volunteer on the Wikimedia project since 2005. My day job is astronomy, so I volunteer all my time for Wikimedia. I'm based in London nowadays.
Hi everyone, my name is Yael Weisberg. I'm the Vice President of Community Growth at the Foundation, which is a new team that's bringing together existing teams that are focusing on supporting communities. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is great. So I'll start with the questions you can see on the meta page on the program. You can take a look of what we thought that were questions around new formats and experiences, diversity of our movement and content, sustainability and collaboration, and looking to the near future. But I'm going to open it at the middle, so you can also pose questions. You can start thinking about if none of the questions that are prepared address what you really want to know about, we will open up for questions. So we'll start with Selena. And talking about new formats and experiences, can you expand the types of contents we host and support? And I mean, if we're going to expand those, and if so, what formats would you prioritize?
Yeah, thank you for this question. And I know that this is a particularly important issue for GLAMs and folks in communities where encyclopedic content and the creation of encyclopedic articles is not necessarily like a thing that's easily supported by a volunteer community, and there's different ways that those communities want to engage. So today, we actually support a pretty wide variety of content, all mostly in the service of creating encyclopedic content. There are some exceptions, like for example, we have Wiki News, we have manuscripts that we're storing in Wiki Source, there's Wiki Quote, and of course Wikidata, which is more about the storage of facts. And I think this question is also more geared toward certain types of images and video. And what I would say about those specific decisions is that my experience so far, and I've only been here for about a year, is that the barriers to having that content, there are sometimes technical barriers, but what I see is issues with volunteer sustainability. So I think that for each type of content that we would like to add, what I am really interested in exploring with folks is how many volunteers it will take to maintain a large corpus of that kind of data. And I think that in some cases there is a community there that can support it, and there I would say, why not? Let's do it. Absolutely. And then for other types of content, I think there are really significant moderation issues effectively. So, I'm really just want to say I'm really open to talking about that with anyone at any time, and especially here while we're here together. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that I have a particular interest in some of the problems that we identified with content sharing during the global COVID pandemic. And one of the issues that arose was just really struggling with the use of the presentation of tabular data and the mechanisms that you use on Wiki to upload it and share it. It's very challenging. So, yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to eat the mic now. Thank you. And I'm going to try not to breathe very hard either. That's why I was away, because I breathe. Anyway, so so I just wanted to close with, I'm really interested in solving problems with tabular data because I want to be ready for, heaven forbid, the next pandemic or some other problem like that I think the Wikimedia community and, movement are uniquely qualified and experienced with that kind of sharing. Because I think the public space that we created is one of the few places in the world where you can, without basically political consideration, share with other people across political boundaries. And I think that's vitally important in issues that affect the entire world, like a global pandemic. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move to the second and then check on time for Selena and Mike. So how do we make sure that content shared on our projects and products created for them, not just English Wikipedia, is as discoverable and useful as possible? Yeah, if you might share your thoughts on that.
Yes, this is a great question. It's, I think that the way I think about this is what readers or consumers of the kind of content that we share, what they need. And this is a complicated question and answer because I think that the readers and consumers, what they need is pretty different than the contributors and editors. So I think the first thing is to separate those different audiences and to carefully consider the use cases. And so, for example, if you look at the needs of editors, and I'll just use Wikipedia as an example here, they often will use Google search instead of our search to find, for example, common typos. They'll do something like that because Google search is just much more effective at that kind of search. There are other things that our search is good at, but this is the challenge: is that search engines are not all the same, and so we kind of have to think in those terms about the specific audiences. So I would just say, focusing on the particular use case, and then figuring out how can we deliver the best service for that particular use case. That's how I approach this problem.
So I think I've got two answers for this with slightly different hats on. So the first is kind of with the volunteer hat on, that Wikidata, I think, is a really useful tool for this, for linking between all the different projects and being able to share content across all the different ones at the same time. So it's a kind of a nice, interesting, scalable way. If you want to hear more about that, they've got a session with Joe tomorrow about it. Yeah, I could talk forever about Wikidata, but that's volunteer hat on. With board volunteer hat on, we're doing, at the moment, a review of sister projects. We have Wikipedia, but we also have all the other sister projects. Wikidata and Commons, the most common. But we also have Wikisource, we have Wikibooks, Wikiversity, Wikinews, all of these different projects. We've now also gained Wikifunctions as a newest sister project. But we've never actually gone back and said what makes sense for us to have as projects. We have people coming up with ideas for new projects all the time. There's a huge list on Meta. We haven't been even tackling that for the last decade. So we're trying to figure out ways of engaging with that, to have a process for looking at new content ideas and seeing how that fits in with the Wikimedia movement at the moment, whether there's communities available and interested to support those, whether it makes sense to adopt new communities coming in, like Wikivoyage happened, whether it makes sense to merge or split projects. My favorite example at the moment is, does it make sense to have individual Wikisource languages rather than a combined Wikisource, multilingual Wikisource? Does it make sense to have some projects, or have they been tried and not succeeded, or done their work? We need to have a process which looks at all of this and tries to say what makes sense. Community-driven process. So we've currently got a task force of technically it's part of the CAC, the Community Affairs Committee of the Board of Trustees, that's looking at this with volunteers to try to define a process for doing reviews of projects and looking at the new proposals coming in. But in principle, that could be a really powerful way of getting new different types of content coming onto the projects that don't fall under the catch-all of a Wikipedia or the existing sister projects.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I think you touch on something like what makes sense, which communities are interested in supporting those things. And that actually brings us to something that we saw consistently as a worry within the community, which is sustainability, right? And the way we capture those many questions around sustainability is as follows. So what would be a sustainable infrastructure for GLAM Wiki workflows? And is there a role for movement entities and partners to research or develop them? And this question is mostly for Selena and Mike, but also, open. And then we'll cut it there. You can see the questions, as they said, in the Meta program and see if your question is not addressed, and we'll open the floor for other questions.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for this question. It is really this idea of sustainability, in particular long-term sustainability, is really on my mind, and it's the subject of the talk I'm going to give at the end of the day today. So how I think about this problem is I think about, for all the different tools that are out there today, and I've over the last couple of weeks, I've been lucky enough to spend a little time in person with Andrew Lee in Toronto. I was able today to go to the Open Refine lecture, which was really helpful for me in understanding exactly how the tools work today. And I've seen demonstrations of many of these tools, actually. But there, let's say there's 50, and each time I go to one of these events, I learn about a few more. When I think about each one of those tools, I'm curious, and the question that I've asked is exactly where do these tools overlap? Where are there opportunities for people to maybe use the same workflows and align? And I think that these are still kind of open questions in our sustainability. I would say going from 50 to 5 is probably what I'm thinking about. And it's a very hard thing to do, but I think that what we would get out of a commitment like that is that sustainability training that lasts you know, for many years with tools that still work. So that's what I'm thinking about. So that's one piece of it. So that agreement and us like coming together and figuring that out. And then the other part of it, I think, is funding sustainability, which I truly do not have an answer to. And I really would love to hear the ideas. You know, some of you have come and talked to me already about this today, and I really want to engage in that conversation. But I think that's like a truly difficult open question. How can we fund this work over the long term? I believe in the commons. I think that it's vitally important that everyone contributes to the commons for free, you know, in perpetuity. However, like, we have to pay people to make these tools, I think, in order for them to be sustainable. So how do we do that? And I don't know. So yeah, so I'm really open to having that conversation, and I love that I'm here to, you know, respond to that question and have, you know, a discussion about it.
Just building on that, Selena, sorry, I'm going to try to learn from the other two panelists and really get close to the mic. One of the things I saw in the questions that were sent ahead is that there's a lot of interest in case studies around GLAM and stories of impact, and I think that is crucial to what you're talking about, Selena. We cannot, it is very hard to raise funds for this kind of work without making clear what is delivered and telling that in a compelling way that resonates with multiple audiences. So that's something that I know folks on my team are focusing on this year, and that we'll want to be working with you all on, is what is working in the GLAM sector? What are you seeing as high impact projects? What are some of the things you're hearing from potential partners that resonates with them? And then how can we help you at the foundation? How can we help amplify those stories and tell those stories in a way that supports longer term investment in the work?
Just to add another perspective to that, kind of from the volunteer side, we're very good at prototyping tools and demonstrating cool things. We're not very good at making those into reliable tools that are useful for everything. And I'm guilty of this myself with the Wikidata info boxes on Commons. The first version was terrible. It loaded in 10 seconds, which is not good. But then support from the Google Summer of Code, got a very good student engaged who rewrote it all in Lua, became really, really fast. Is that better? Sorry. I feel like I'm going to eat it now, but yep. So thinking about how to make the tools more sustainable from a volunteer perspective is a really good thing as well. I think there are opportunities out there to do that for relatively little investment. So I'm a big proponent of things like Outreachy and Google Summer of Code, and engaging students to work on these tools and make sure that they are open source. I know there's things on Wikidata which are really important tools like constraint violations. You can't access the code. If something breaks with that, it's gone. And that's really not sustainable. So trying to make sure things are open source, that there's a community of more than one person supporting it, is also really important. Not just saying, here, foundation, off you go. It needs to be a joint effort between that.
So as we announced, we're halfway through, and if you already saw, we shared the questions in the Telegram group. So if you feel that there's something you want to ask and that it's not there, please, this is the moment. If not, we will follow with the questions we have prepared, and you still have a little bit of time to think. But is anyone here like very curious about something you want to ask the panel? Yeah.
I can't believe you spotted me from all the way from the stage. So sort of picking up on the sustainability question, I think the topics that we often tend to go to are sustainability of tools and workflows, and that's my natural inclination as well. I'm a developer, I build things, that's what I think about. But probably the majority of Wiki contributors are not people who are making tools, they're people who are contributing content, they're making edits, they're actually writing the huge amount of prose which then goes into these tools. So I was wondering if the panel have any thoughts on the sustainability of that huge pool of volunteer labor that's not directly created, that's about creating the content rather than creating the tools.
I was just pointing at Selena because I think there's some technical responses to this and there's some sort of like social investment responses to this. So I'll start on the latter. as I mentioned in my very brief introduction, I lead the community growth function, which is a new team composed of the programs team, which includes the culture and heritage work, grant making, community development, and partnerships. And it's a relatively new team, and one of the things that we have been thinking about is how do we ensure that contributing to Wikimedia projects is a joyful, delightful experience? And alongside that, how do we make sure, or how do we support, I'm trying to find a way to word this, because it's a challenge we're wrestling with. I do not have an answer to that. So that's the short version is I don't have an answer. But something I'm curious about is how do we ensure that participating in Wikimedia projects actually makes the rest of your life better too? To me, there's something there around people come to Wikimedia and want to participate. We have the most, in some ways, like the easiest value proposition for why you should join our movement. It is an incredible movement. You get to contribute to the sum of free knowledge. And then when you come, it can be an incredibly frustrating experience. And so one of the things that our team is trying to work on is how do we take some of those really common frustrations and unblock them? So I don't have exact solutions for this. I'm open to ideas, but the kinds of things we're thinking about is it should not be as difficult as it is to get a small amount of money to do a project. Or it should not be as difficult as it is to get the book you need to cite something on Wikipedia. Like there are little things that are, the way I've been describing them is kind of like a thorn in your shoe. It's not a huge obstacle, but it's really annoying. And I think that is a role that we at the foundation can help step into, is making participating in the movement an actual delight and ensuring that outside of the movement your life benefits from participating here. So things like, is there a role for getting some sort of like certification or badge for volunteer work you're doing in Wikipedia that can support you in your educational pursuits? The Wikipedia library, Vipin, our project manager for that, is here, but I've heard of people who use the Wikipedia library to create content on Wikipedia, and then because they have access to that, they're able to write their master's thesis, for example. So areas like that where we can actually meet the volunteers where they are and ensure that it's a more joyful experience is something that is a big, wide open question, and I'm looking at you hoping you'll help us solve that in the coming years. So that's the non-technical answer. I know Selena has some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I'll just say I think the non-technical answer is like really might be more important than some of the technical work, frankly. There's definitely technical work that can be done. How the product and technology group at the foundation has thought about this in the past has been a lot about growth. There's a team called Growth that works on new editor growth. And what they're trying to do is encourage, the previous theory was that a reader, readers must just like, by logic proof, must turn into editors at some point. So let's create opportunities there to entice them to become editors and stick around. And we've had some success with that, not like knock it out of the park success. And now we're like kind of exploring basically different ways that we should actually approach answering this question of how to encourage and retain editors. There's a few things, like, so if you look at it in terms of content, so basically the way that I think about all of these problems is in terms of the things that we can measure and then whether or not we can have measurable impact on those things that we're measuring. So an example might be content, increasing a specific kind of content, like how that happens, which editors are involved, and the things that we and other volunteers can do to encourage more of a certain type of content. So when you start looking at things that way, then you start looking at the activities, I think there's, basically a value proposition for editors that we need to make really clear. What are the tools that you get to use? What are the benefits that you get? Like not necessarily extrinsic benefits always, but sometimes, and then making that clear to people, like what the value of that is. A lot of people actually come to do this editing, and I'll just say a lot of people, but not all. There's many people that come to do editing and they're very solo, but a lot of people come to edit for social reasons. And they really like knowing that they're doing something that's for the good of humanity. They like knowing that there are other people that think like them also doing similar work. And so ways that we can surface that, ways that we can connect people that are editing on a certain topic with other people interested in that topic. And it doesn't have to be like a Facebook group. It can just be that there's adequate tagging so that they can find these other articles, and then the editors that are doing that work. So I think there's a lot of untapped potential there. So that's one area. Another thing that we're thinking about are the editors that are from the 500 edit mark, you know, maybe up to like, I don't know, 5,000 edits, like people who are in that zone. What are they doing? What's keeping them here? You know, what are the kinds of other productive things, you know, that happen on Wiki? There's a lot of research that needs to be done actually in this area, you know, because of the approach that we had before, we didn't actually do a lot of research on the specific workflows of those kinds of volunteers. So a lot of new ground basically to be broken, and yeah. So those are kind of the things that I'm thinking about right now. But will be more, and I'm again, like any ideas that folks have, things that have been tried that were successful, I'd love to hear.
I think as well, this is not just a foundation problem, this is all of our problem. So affiliates have a big role here to play to support local areas, to support topics. Often it's kind of just talking to someone about a problem you're having on Wiki is a really useful thing to do, and you can do that locally in ways you can't do necessarily globally. As well, there's things like on Wiki activities. So it can be really hostile to edit some Wikipedias in some areas in particular, and that generally needs to change because we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're sending away volunteers that could grow our projects. So one thing that's been happening recently is a universal code of conduct that's been coming into force, and there's the committee setting up to be operating that at the moment. And that, I think, will help a lot with making sure things remain civil across all the different projects. But as well, there's a lot of importance with the local committees, local communities online as well, to make sure that when you see a newbie coming along, you don't bite, you encourage them to start editing or find ways, oh, you're not doing too well with that, but I see you're interested in this other topic. You might get more success there, or upload a photo, or things like that. So we're actively growing the community, not just always working with the people we know.
Anyone else? I can see your hand raised. Another one there. So, yeah, that order. Sorry? Yeah, sorry. So, 1, 2, 3. Yep. I think she was first. Susanna, yeah.
Hey, thank you. I would like to ask about GLAM as partnerships and institutional data and a community of contributors outside the Wikimedia community. And actually, this is very much a characteristic of the GLAM activities. And so my overall question is that how can we together, all of us, facilitate those workflows that aim to bring those people to become contributors and to contribute to the Wikimedia projects in the long term, and maybe changing many of the current assumptions of what a contributor looks like.
I mean, Susanna, I kind of want to hear from you, and I want to build off your ideas, because I'm guessing you have good ones. Would you be willing to share a little bit about your thoughts? You know, just come up and take a seat.
No, actually, I think it's a kind of a change of paradigm. Like, do we do this only for individual volunteers, or do we do this for partners who are networks of contributors? And I think it's not something that I have a solution for, but I think it's something that we need to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot. Before I took on this role in community growth, I was the director of partnerships at the foundation, and I will say, I said candidly, but we're being recorded, so. But I was surprised how difficult it was Wikimedia is the easiest place in some ways to build partnerships. Everyone wants to work with you, and related to the earlier question, it's very hard to work with us actually if you're an institutional partner. I've been learning a lot from Ben in the last few months, and one of the mottos I've come to think about is like every librarian should be a Wikimedian, every museum curator should be a Wikimedian, and I'm consistently surprised how hard that institutional partnership is. So I love the idea of the paradigm shift. I think it probably has some technical implications that I'm curious to hear from Selena. But from a partnerships perspective, I would love to see us much more closely embedded with all these institutions. I mean, Fiona and I were talking the other day about, I'm posing this in front of everyone, so I don't know if this is a great idea, but like, why isn't the GLAM Wiki conference aligned with the ICOM conference, for example, right? Like, how do we align AFLIA with the work that we do here? How do we really start to ensure that Wikimedia is embedded in all of these other networks and institutions, and that they are embedded with us? So I love the idea of a paradigm shift, and I have no solutions, but I'm curious with you.
Yeah, so I think about the challenges on the technical front in two areas. One of them is, I guess, more social, but it gets back to the volunteers that do the moderation and curation work on the projects. And so there, I think we just need to think carefully about what the consequences are for having institutions that are truly like fully engaged and at scale, because I'm not sure that we have the volunteer infrastructure, and so that would mean that the institutions would also need to engage in some of the activities that volunteers engage with, and engage with those communities in a way that probably is unfamiliar to the institutions, and maybe like unfamiliar to the point of discomfort, to the point of not wanting to do it. So I think that's a real like fundamental challenge that is harder to solve, frankly, than the technical challenges, because I think the technical challenges, there's some, and I think of it in a few different areas. Like, so I'm a very visual person, so I've got like a layer cake in my mind right now that's like talking about the APIs and the UI for bulk upload, and then the UI for curation, and then the UI for like getting stuff that's in Commons over to some other wiki, all of these things. But I really think those problems, it's not super easy to solve. They can be solved with money, but if you don't solve the volunteering aspect of it and finding a way to engage the way that these communities would like to engage, in the way that they've evolved to engage, I think that's really a challenge. And I've seen this challenge not just in the GLAM space. It exists in other spaces. But I think that's a really serious issue to grapple with. And yeah, and I don't really have an answer to that either. Again, like being here for, about 14 months, I think I have barely scratched the surface, and I know some of the stories of things that have been tried and the challenges. But I also, with that newness, I bring a lot of energy. So I'm like game to try, a few different approaches. But I really think like addressing like the volunteer issues is the only path through. Like I think you can't really do this work without the volunteers.
Hola, ¿puedo hacer la pregunta en castellano?
Can I make a question in Spanish? We have talked a lot about how the GLAM community has become diversified in the last few years, not just people who get involved to contribute with content, but there are also people who get involved because they see in the Wikimedia projects a possibility of having an incidence towards greater representation of some communities, colonization of certain contents, creation of community in general. And I would like to ask the three of you, as much as you can answer, how do you think that the Wikimedia Foundation and the Wikimedia movement can answer to the needs of these new groups, and what recommendations of the 2030 strategy do you think could help us to provide this response, and that we may be able to promote from the movement so that we work jointly with these communities.
Just try to repeat the question for the recording and for Mike. Who speaks Spanish? But
Tengo que repetir.
no. I'll try.
Okay. I was very scared.
I'm wrong. So you're saying the community has diversified, right? And there's not just people who want to share content, but there's people who are engaging in different ways. And you're asking, how are we addressing the needs of those? And also, which of the recommendations of the 2030 strategy, yes, thank you, would we connect with those needs? Yeah, great. Please.
Great question, thank you. So there's a few different ways on like the product and technology front that we think about this. One strategy that we've used has been to take features that we're thinking about and working with communities on and deploying them in communities that are asking for them or just not, on English Wikipedia first. And what that does is it exposes us to the use cases and the ways of working that are happening outside of like the largest global community, and we get to see exactly how new features might work in other places. And that's been really successful in broadening the perspective of the staff and frankly the volunteers that work on these problems, because when we do that, we also get the opportunity to take volunteers that are interested in these features, and they get exposed to the issues and concerns and use cases that are happening other places in the world. So that's like a unique opportunity that we have actually in the product work that we do. Another way that we've thought about this is when we have a proposal for a type of change, like right now we're considering typography changes across all of the wikis. And so we have a way of reaching out to individuals and asking them to just like give us screenshots and then their thoughts on what's happening. When they have a little tool that they can use to change things and give us their thoughts, and it reaches folks everywhere. So it's not just like one community. And then what we do is we stay in touch with those folks that engage with this, and then we ask them for information about their lives, that they volunteer, and then we can use that to then find people who, is like a mother, who mostly is like editing or viewing Wikipedia on their phone, in the afternoons or whatever. They give us context, cultural context, that becomes a part of how we make our products. So those are a couple ways that we've changed like the details of how we do our work, and there's like a whole process that we use that's documented and published on the wiki for product development that Jasmine here, as product manager, helped create. And so those are the types of things is we try to like embed in our processes ways of engaging not just the loudest voices, not just like the largest communities, and then document that and be transparent and just continuously improve.
Okay, it won't take me. Patricia, I love this question. Thank you. One of the things that I think most, so I'm based in San Francisco in California, and I think one of the things that most large tech companies miss when they talk about scale is that anytime you're talking about scale, you're going to solve for most. That it's easier, it's faster, it's bigger, but you're going to solve for most, and by definition, you're going to miss key pieces. And so something I'm thinking a lot about is how do we, I don't think we can fill, whether it's knowledge gaps or contributor gaps, by doing everything we've done in the same way. I love the product interventions that Selena is talking about that Jasmine has built. We also think in the community growth team about how do we invite audiences in? How do you actually, instead of waiting for people to come, how do I reach for you? Right? Like what are the gaps in the movement that we know exist or that some people are bringing to light in the movement but are still relatively small? How do we actively reach for those people and encourage them to come in? one of the ways that our team is thinking about this, but I always welcome more suggestions and feedback, is that in addition to organizing thematically, so we have the culture and heritage team, the education work, and the gender team that we've got, we're also organized regionally. And if you look at the regions that we're focused on, we are predominantly focused on regions that have been underrepresented in the movement. And we're hiring people who are based in those regions, who are actively building partnerships, reaching out to communities in those regions. It's an intentional choice, you know? So, for example, coming out of that work, we're learning things, I don't know if it's learning, these are not maybe new insights for the movement, but understanding more deeply the challenges of contributing to English Wikipedia, as an example, if you're an editor in Sub-Saharan Africa, compared to if you're an editor in ECAP. The challenges there are some commonalities in terms of challenges. There are also some unique needs or some unique barriers in this particular example that our team, that the foundation and the movement, I think, can lean into solving. It's slower than solving at the big picture, right? So some of the things we're thinking about, some of you may know about the editor growth project that Asaf and a few folks at the foundation are working on in Africa. We're thinking about what are the key moments where an editor drops out of the editing funnel and what's happening there. And sometimes it's technical, things like IP blocking, things like access to internet. Other times it's friction within the movement, or a difference in understanding of what we mean by neutral point of view, for example. So it's a slower approach to working at solving these issues, but we're trying to go much more deeply into the lived experience of editors in this case, and try to understand how do we unblock each of those barriers. I'd love to hear any other ideas or thoughts you have, but I guess the big picture response I have is it's slower and it involves an active like reaching for and pulling in, and that's something that's why I'm in this movement. That's something I'm really passionate about and committed to. So thank you for the question.
We only have 3 minutes, and there was one last question. I don't know if, yeah. Yeah? Okay. So, is there anything else you want to add? I think we had a very wonderful panel. Actually, I'm learning things at work. I'm like, oh, typing. And thank you so much for your time. And you've identified, so if you were curious about the Wikipedia library and how you can access sources, that's Vipin over there. And apps, you know, that's Jasmine over there. Like, she is developing those things. So this is not the end of the conversation. You already can, you know, see some of the people who are in charge of things, so let's keep talking. This is why we did it on the first day, so this conversation can keep going, right? So anything? Yes, sure. Sorry, Mike.
Just to mention as well, we have regular calls with the Community Affairs Committee. The next one of these is coming up in December, and you're welcome to submit questions for that and to come along and ask questions as well live. There's askcac@wikimedia.org address if you have any questions for the board. And really is any questions open to discussing anything pretty much.
Okay, I'm going to add another PSA to that. Please come find us one-on-one. Come find us so we can have conversations. There's also the Culture and Heritage team at the foundation has an office hours button on their meta page. Is that right, Fiona? So you can also, I mean, please find them while they're here, but you can also schedule time anytime you want to talk to folks. We want to make sure that we are easy to reach, both here in person and when we go back to our various locations. So please take advantage of that. I love hearing from folks.
Yeah, same. All that. And like, some people send me email, sometimes extremely long emails, and I just want to tell you that I love them so much. One of the wonderful things about working in this space is that people are incredible writers and they come with their citations. So yeah, please don't hesitate if you're like, I wrote an email and it's too long. No, it's not too long. Just go ahead and send it. I really appreciate it. And it's just my first initial last name, you know, at wikimedia.org. You can find me. So please.